Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because today we're covering a story that honestly made me laugh out loud when I first read it, and then made me stop and think, wait, actually, that comparison is kind of genius. We're talking about Billboard, one of the most respected names in the entire music industry, publishing a description of Jimin's hair that compares it to Samson, the biblical figure whose entire strength came from his hair. Yes, you heard that right. Not his voice. Not his dancing. Not his stage presence in general. His hair specifically got compared to one of the most famous strength myths in human history. Let's break down exactly what happened, why this comparison makes way more sense than you'd think, and why the internet completely lost it over this. So let's set the stage first, because context always makes these moments land so much better. This all comes out of the London stop of the ongoing BTS World Tour, a massive two-night run at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium that fans had been waiting years for. This wasn't just another tour stop either, it marked the group's full return to the UK after 7 years away, which already gave the entire run an emotional weight that went beyond just another sold-out show. 7 years is a long time in any fandom's timeline, and when a group finally comes back to a city that's been waiting that long, the anticipation alone tends to create the kind of electric atmosphere that sticks with everyone who was there. And it wasn't just fans who noticed that energy. Major publications showed up to cover the event too, which honestly says a lot about how far BTS's cultural reach has grown over the years. We're talking about outlets like The Guardian, one of the most respected daily newspapers in the UK, alongside Billboard, arguably the single most influential publication in the entire American and global music industry. Ad and Dazed, a UK-based fashion and culture outlet known for its sharp, trend-focused coverage, and you've got a trio of seriously credible names all independently deciding this show was worth their attention. Let's start with The Guardian, because their response alone would have been a massive story on its own. They gave the concert a full 5-star review, which if you're not familiar with how UK arts and entertainment journalism works, is basically the ceiling. 5 stars is not something handed out casually. It's reserved for performances that critics genuinely believe represent some of the best work in their respective field. And within that glowing review, the writer made a point of noting that by the end of the night, they had personally developed a favorite member. That's a pretty remarkable thing for a professional critic to admit in print, because critics are generally trained to maintain a certain distance, a kind of professional objectivity. For someone in that position to openly say the show moved them enough to develop a genuine personal favorite tells you just how impactful the performance actually was. And of course, you can probably guess who that favorite ended up being. Jimin. Now let's get into the main event, because this is really where the story takes off. Billboard put together their own recap of the London shows, highlighting the standout moments across the entire performance. And in the middle of that recap, sitting right alongside major setlist highlights and emotional fan moments, was an entire section dedicated specifically to Jimin's hair. Not his vocals. Not his dancing, which, let's be honest, is consistently one of the most talked about aspects of his performances. His hair. An entire section of a major music publication's official recap, dedicated to hair. At first glance, that might sound almost like a joke, the kind of thing you'd expect from a lighthearted fan account rather than one of the most respected names in music journalism. But once you actually understand the visual moment they were describing, it makes a lot more sense why they gave it this much attention. Throughout the London shows, Jimin performed with long, voluminous blonde hair, a style that's been compared by multiple fashion outlets to a mix of iconic vintage looks. Think that classic feathered shag silhouette popularized decades ago, blended with something a little more otherworldly and dramatic. It's a big, bold look, the kind of hairstyle that's impossible to ignore even from the back rows of a massive stadium. And during the performance, as Jimin moved through his choreography, particularly during more intense, high-energy segments, he was headbanging, whipping that long hair through the air with each beat. That visual, hair flying dramatically with every powerful movement, catching the stadium lighting, moving almost like it had a life of its own, is exactly what caught Billboard's attention enough to write about it separately from the rest of the performance. They described it as having a kind of powerful, almost mythic presence on its own, something striking enough that it deserved recognition completely independent from everything else happening on stage. Now here's where the Samson comparison comes in, and honestly, once you break it down, it's a genuinely clever piece of writing rather than just a random reach for a dramatic headline. If you're familiar with the story of Samson, you'll know that in that ancient narrative, his physical strength wasn't just generally tied to his body or his willpower, it was specifically and directly tied to his hair. As long as his hair remained uncut, he possessed extraordinary strength. The moment his hair was cut, that strength vanished completely. It's one of the most well-known examples in storytelling of hair being framed not just as an aesthetic feature, but as a literal source of power. So when Billboard reached for that specific comparison, they weren't just making a vague joke about big hair equals big energy. They were making a much more precise, much more visually accurate connection. They were describing a moment where Jimin's hair itself became a kind of performative force, a visual element that carried its own weight and power on stage, separate from but amplifying everything else he was doing. It wasn't really about literal physical strength in the way Samson's story is about strength, it was about visual and stylistic power, about how something as seemingly simple as hair could dominate a stadium's worth of attention purely through motion and presence. And that distinction matters a lot, because it explains why this comparison landed so well instead of feeling like a lazy, throwaway line. If they had simply said Jimin was energetic on stage, that description alone wouldn't have generated nearly the same reaction. Energetic performances are, frankly, expected at this level of the industry. Every member of BTS brings that kind of intensity to their performances night after night, it's part of the baseline expectation fans already have. What made this specific detail worth writing about, worth pulling out into its own dedicated section of a major recap, was the specificity of it. It wasn't a generic compliment about stage presence, it was a razor-sharp observation about one very particular visual element that stood out even within an already incredibly high-energy show. That's honestly a great lesson in what makes certain observations go viral versus others that just fade into the background. Specificity sells. Vague praise gets skimmed past. But a hyper-specific, slightly unexpected comparison, hair having its own kind of mythic power, sticks in your head. It makes you want to go back and actually watch the footage to see if the description holds up. And once fans did exactly that, once people started pulling up clips of Jimin whipping his hair through those performance segments, the comparison suddenly felt less like a stretch and more like an incredibly accurate read of what was actually happening on that stage. Let's also talk about why this particular hairstyle had already been generating so much buzz even before Billboard's comparison went semi-viral. This look, the long, voluminous blonde hair, had already been getting attention across multiple fashion and style publications in the lead up to and throughout this tour. It's been described by various outlets as blending different iconic aesthetic references, pulling from classic decades of rock and glam influence while still feeling completely fresh and current. That's honestly a difficult needle to thread in fashion, referencing something nostalgic without feeling like a costume, while also feeling forward-thinking rather than derivative. And there's a broader pattern here too, because this isn't the first time Jimin's hairstyling choices throughout this era of his career have generated this level of dedicated media attention. If you've been following along with his tour looks in general, you'll know that hair specifically has become one of the most consistently discussed elements of his overall image throughout this entire run. Multiple publications, across multiple countries and multiple language markets, have circled back again and again to talk specifically about his hair, sometimes even dedicating entire features or segments to tracking its evolution throughout different tour stops. That kind of sustained, specific attention doesn't happen by accident. It reflects a combination of genuinely bold styling choices paired with someone who knows exactly how to move in a way that makes those choices land as dramatically as possible on stage. Hair that just sits there, no matter how voluminous or well-styled, doesn't generate this kind of reaction. It's the combination of the visual styling itself with the physical performance, the way it's used as an active part of the choreography rather than just a passive aesthetic detail, that creates moments powerful enough to earn comparisons to ancient mythology in a major music publication. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about some of the other details from this London run that fans have been buzzing about, because the hair moment wasn't happening in isolation, it was part of a broader wave of coverage around just how much of a spectacle these shows turned out to be. Dazed, the fashion and culture outlet I mentioned earlier, ended up posting footage from the London shows on their official social platforms, and notably, out of the entire two-night run, the specific clip they chose to share featured Jimin's performance during one of the setlist's more intense tracks. Out of everything happening across 2 full nights of a massive stadium tour, that was the moment they decided was worth sharing with their audience. That's a pretty telling detail about just how much that specific performance stood out even among industry professionals who cover events like this constantly and have plenty of other footage to choose from. There's also a fun little detail that made the rounds afterward involving a specific accessory Jimin wore during the first night of the London shows, a distinctive cat ear beanie from a well-known British designer brand. According to reports circulating after the show, that exact item reportedly sold out on the brand's official online store while the concert was still happening. Think about that for a second. A specific piece of merchandise, worn once, during a live performance, sold out in real time as people watched the show and immediately went looking for where they could get the same item. That's an incredible testament to just how much influence these performances carry, not just in terms of media coverage and critical reviews, but in terms of actual, immediate, real-world consumer behavior. All of these little details, the 5-star review, the hair comparison, the sold-out accessory, the specific clip chosen by a major culture outlet, paint a pretty clear picture of just how much of a cultural moment this London run turned out to be. It wasn't just a successful concert in the traditional sense of ticket sales and setlist execution, it became this multi-layered media event where nearly every angle of coverage found something specific and detailed enough to turn into its own standalone story. Now, I want to spend a little more time really digging into why the Samson comparison specifically resonated so strongly with people online, because I think there's something worth understanding here about how internet culture processes and amplifies moments like this. When a comparison is clever enough, specific enough, and just a little bit unexpected, it creates this perfect combination of humor and genuine admiration that makes people want to share it immediately. It's funny because on the surface, comparing someone's hair to an ancient biblical strongman sounds almost absurd. But it's also genuinely admiring because once you actually think it through, once you connect the dots between the visual of hair as a literal power source in that story and the visual of hair dominating a stadium performance through sheer dramatic movement, the comparison actually makes complete sense. That combination, humor plus genuine insight, is basically the perfect formula for content that spreads fast across social media. People aren't just sharing it because it's a nice compliment, they're sharing it because it's a genuinely clever piece of writing that rewards you for actually thinking about it for a second. It's the kind of headline that makes you stop scrolling, reread it, and then immediately want to see the footage that inspired it. And once people did go looking for that footage, the payoff was there. The clips of Jimin whipping his hair through those performance segments really do carry a kind of dramatic, almost theatrical power that justifies exactly the kind of language Billboard used to describe it. Let's also take a second to appreciate just how far this kind of individual attention has come. There was a time, not even that long ago in the grand scheme of things, when this level of granular, detail-specific coverage from major Western publications simply wasn't something K-pop performers received on a regular basis. Coverage tended to focus on broader strokes, chart positions, sales numbers, general reviews of a group's sound or choreography as a whole. The fact that a single member's hair, in a single moment of a single show, can generate this much dedicated, thoughtful commentary from an outlet like Billboard says a lot about how much things have shifted. It reflects a media landscape that's now willing to engage with these performances on the same level of detail and seriousness that it would apply to any other major global artist, examining not just the broad strokes but the small, specific details that make a performance genuinely memorable. And honestly, that shift benefits everyone involved. It gives fans validation that the things they've been obsessing over and discussing among themselves for years, the styling choices, the small performance details, the way a single visual moment can carry so much weight, are being recognized and taken seriously by the wider industry too. It's no longer just an internal fandom conversation, it's become part of the broader cultural conversation happening in mainstream music journalism. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. Did you see the original footage that inspired this comparison, and do you think the Samson description actually holds up once you watch it, or do you think it's a bit of an exaggeration? I'm genuinely curious to hear different takes on this one, because I think there's a fun debate to be had about just how far these kinds of dramatic comparisons should go, even when they're clearly coming from a place of genuine admiration. Drop your thoughts down in the comments, I read every single one, and I always love seeing the different angles you all bring to these conversations. If you enjoyed this breakdown, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already part of the crew, and turn on notifications so you don't miss whatever comes next, because if this tour has proven anything so far, it's that there's always another headline-worthy moment just around the corner. Thank you so much for watching, I'll catch you in the next video, and until then, take care of yourselves. Bye!